Obviously, it's really early on, and I have defects of character that, everything's new. And I was having problems with personal relationships still with coworkers and things. And I was having a traumatic experience with one of my new shop foremans. We were butting heads, and the old me wanted to do these things, but I was using the program. I was talking to people, and I'd never done that before, right? Just calling my sponsor and being like, I'm thinking of just walking out the door, like doing something stupid, and being talked down or talked through it. And just that little, what step 11 talks, pause when agitated. That was all new for me, but that stuff worked. Like, saved my butt big time. Yeah.
I heard it through the grapevine.
Welcome. It's the AA Grapevine Half-Hour Variety Hour, featuring the collective voices of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm Don, an alcoholic in the sleepy southern town of Greensboro, North Carolina.
Ooh, the Greensboro City Hall is going to be coming to you for that one. Hey everybody, I'm Sam, an alcoholic in Palm Springs, California, where everything is awesome and sunny all the time, except for right now where there's a windstorm and lots of clouds and rain.
Okay. Well, I'm glad we got the weather part down. Sam, it's a new month, and you know what that means.
Time to check my calendar and say, wait, what happened to last month?
No!
What?
The new grapevines are here! The new grapevines!
Oh, we got a sound effect now.
Oh, fabulous day, Kaloo Kalay! I chortle in my joy.
And now we're back to the 1800s. Okay.
That's a Jabberwocky.
Well, okay, the early 1900s. We get letters all the time from incarcerated members saying how grateful they are to have Grapevine in Lavinia. Many tell us it's the only AA meeting they have. Luckily, there are incredibly dedicated outside volunteers who write letters, sponsor, and do vital correction service. This month's special section features powerful stories of hope from AA members inside and out of prison walls.
But don't skip the letters section, dear Grapevine. In The Reason We Do This, a member writes of the successful struggle to get a meeting going again in a local prison after COVID. The newly formed Perseverance Group now has 6 attending. And I enjoyed another letter where the writer refers to the friends he made when he got sober as his littermates.
Oh, yeah, I've heard littermates.
Yeah.
I like that, yeah. In the story and experience you must not miss, a member in Canada shares how helping members inside gives him joy like no other.
In I Want What She Has, it's the cheerfulness of outside volunteers that got one woman's attention.
There's also a wonderful update of an innovative method of sponsoring incarcerated AA members by a member in California.
You know, there's a wealth of information for corrections committees and anyone doing correction service on the AA.org website. There's a corrections kit and workbook, as well as forms for corresponding with an AA member inside and outside. Visit AA.org and search for corrections committees.
We have to talk about one more story, the day hope arrived. A writer describes how that first drink feels. I had my first drink at age 13, and all I can say is that it felt like my entire soul took a deep breath. Suddenly, life wasn't weird anymore, and I didn't feel like an outcast. Then, while locked up sick and detoxing, he looked for something to read to cheer him up. Instead, he found a new life, and we found him. He's our guest today.
Suddenly, life wasn't weird anymore. I love it.
Today's guest is Jeffrey W. from Peachland, British Columbia. His story, The Day Hope Arrived, is on page 25 of the June 2025 issue. Y'all can pause the podcast and go read it real quick. Or you can have your app read it to you in the Grapevine app. Subscribe for only $2.99 a month.
But y'all, wait. Don't do it until we finish with the news.
Getting through tough times. Things like a serious illness, divorce, the death of a loved one, a house fire, loss of a job, bankruptcy. How have you stayed sober through adversity? Tell us how the program and the fellowship helped you. Submit your story to aagrapevine.org/share. Stories are due by July 15, 2025.
No matter what, dealing with adversity and sobriety is a Grapevine book full of powerful stories of AA members about using the tools in the fellowship to get through the tough times in sobriety. It includes helpful stories about illness, divorce, financial loss, death of a child or sponsor, house fires, and more. Great for members going through difficult times. Find it under Books in the Grapevine store, online, or in the app.
Hi, I'm Jeffrey. I'm an alcoholic. I live in beautiful Peachland, British Columbia. My home group is the Peachland Fellowship. We meet Friday nights at 7 p.m.
When did you get sober?
My sobriety date is October 15th, 2023.
Jeffrey, what was going on in your life that led you to get sober in AA?
You guys mentioned a little bit of my story at the beginning, having my first drink at 13 and knowing right away that it was like kind of profound. I had that feeling of apartness and separation that Bill talks about in the 12 and 12. And he describes it as a mysterious barrier that like we can't surmount nor understand. I didn't really know about that until I had that first drink, and that barrier that seemed to separate me came down. I chased that elusive feeling for a lot of years. I had ups and downs with drinking throughout all that time, but I was a guy with good earning capacity. I was always able to build up that bright outlook for my family and stuff. Was married for 17 years, built a successful business, but eventually, a senseless series of sprees I would burn my life to the ground. And that repeated a lot over the years. It led to my wife and kids leaving me. I was alone with my business, was in a different town. My wife and kids had left. I drank so much around the clock, could not stop, that I basically ceased to function. I couldn't go to work. My business fell apart. It was a franchise business. They basically took it away from me. At one time, I had a house with my family that you would have thought was a ski lodge. We lived in this beautiful place. I ended up single, alone, in a bachelor suite with one bedroom. I drank so much around the clock that the empties were piled up like mountains on either side of the door to the bed. I had a pathway, and when I would close the door, the empties would avalanche, and I'd
Oh,
have to
wow.
dig my way out, quite literally. I sat at that table drinking so much I would sleep at the table. My left leg turned black from lack of circulation. I finally went to a doctor, and they were talking about amputating my leg from the knee down. That didn't stop me. I went straight from the doctor to the liquor store. I was just in that spiral, like I could not stop. That health scare straightened me up just a little bit, just a little bit. It was enough to motivate me I thought I was going to die. So I packed up what little I had left, and I moved to the city where my ex-wife and kids had moved to so I could be closer to the kids. There, I got a job. I always interview well. Throughout all my drinking career, I managed to graduate trade school. So I'm a journeyman automotive technician. So I always had that to fall back on, thankfully. So I easily found a job fixing cars. Was still drinking, but trying to keep it under wraps enough to maintain this job and visit my kids on weekends and stuff like that. Of course, I met her, right? And
Another
the girl
woman?
became, the woman that became the love of my life. Her and I were very much like Bonnie and Clyde. We drank together, outside issues together. We went on a couple year run. The thing just escalated and got out of control. My story is described in the big book on page 21 when it talks about the real alcoholic. I didn't always start that way, but I ended up as the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. I would do insanely tragic things while drinking, and it didn't resemble the guy that I was normally at all. I I was blackout drinker. I could go 3 days in a blackout and end up in different cities and not know how I got there. When I'd come out of it, I wouldn't like wake up from being passed out. I would come to
Oh, wow.
walking around and wondering where I was, how I got there. It eventually led, I mean, jails had been part of my story from as early as age 15, doing strange behaviors while drinking. This last one was different. I basically came out of a blackout in a holding cell. Bail had already been denied, and I was on my way to the big jail.
What were you thinking? Do you recall?
Yeah, I was thinking, I need a drink.
Of
I
course.
literally was thinking, that's all I was thinking. I wasn't getting many answers from, the RCMP. I just knew something was different this time, because usually they let you sleep it off, the kind of behavior that I would have, and I'd get released with a hangover and carry on. But this was, my transportation to the big provincial jail here was being arranged, and nobody was really saying anything, because I mean, I was being charged with things and it was different. I was horrified. Really, I was trying to wrap my mind around how I'm gonna get through this without a drink.
Mhm.
That's how bad the obsession was for me, right?
In all this time, you did not have a desire to stop or see drinking as a problem.
No, no. Yeah, it's weird to think that. I mean, I've been
Yeah.
called an alcoholic since I was probably 15, but that didn't mean anything to me, because it was usually non-alcoholics telling me that, and
Yeah.
it would
Mm.
be telling me that I drank too much. But I know physically, yes, I was consuming, an unhealthy amount of alcohol, but it to me, it felt like it was never going to be enough.
When did it turn inside of you to where I need to do something?
Yeah, when I was transferred from the city jail to the provincial jail, this was near the tail end of COVID. So they were really treating it seriously still inside. So the prison itself, there was less inmates. The housing units were at half capacity so that everybody could have their own cell. But before I was able to even get into a housing unit, they had to put me in a COVID quarantine cell, which is the hole, for
Mm-hmm.
my first 7 days, where I was only allowed out of that cell for 1 hour per day by
Mm.
myself. I hadn't seen any other inmates at this time. And I would be walked to a handball court that I could walk around in for that 1 hour rec or have a shower. There was a little bookshelf that they let me pass by, and they said I could take anything off of it and bring it back to my cell.
Mhm.
I remember from like doctor's appointments when I was a kid reading the Reader's Digest joke section, laughter
Yeah.
is the best medicine. And I
Uh-huh.
remember walking past this bookshelf. What I thought I saw was a couple copies of the Reader's Digest, and I wanted to read something funny. That was the thought in my mind. I want to just get out of my head and laugh or something. So I picked up what I thought was a Reader's Digest, and it turned out to be a copy of the Grapevine magazine.
Well, the Grapevine magazine kind of does. It's similar to the Reader's Digest. A
Yeah,
bunch of little stories and
yeah,
jokes in the
it's the same
back.
layout and look,
Yeah.
but it's a little skinnier. And I remember picking it up thinking, man, Reader's Digest went downhill, right? So it's a little skinnier. And then I started reading the stories, and it's like everybody's an alcoholic. I'm like, man, they really went downhill. And yeah, but that was my introduction. And I realized what I was reading was an Alcoholics Anonymous publication. And I was just like, yeah, whatever. And I put it down. I was detoxing by this point and
Yeah.
shaky. And I remember my hands were shaking pretty bad. And then I was looking, there was the kind of novels that you would find like at an airport, just the kind of like John Grisham type stuff like that. And I'm
Mhm.
thumbing through the books and nothing striking my eye. And this little blue book that has nothing written on it caught my eye, because it's like,
Mhm.
what is that? And I pick it up.
In the story, it's like you grab the book and try and put it back, and it falls out, and then you drop it. It won't let you put it back.
It was like, I can remember that. And I was like frustrated, but I remember thinking like, maybe I'm supposed to
See,
read this,
it's
like
like
just like a
maybe I've got
voice
to
in the
read
back of
this.
my head.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
still small voice, right?
yeah, yeah. It
That's
was,
it.
it was this little blue book that I can't really see. There's nothing written on it till you turn the book a little
It's
bit.
embossed.
And actually, I have the exact copy that they
It's a
let me take
dark
out of
blue
there.
book. They let you bring that copy home.
Yeah, when I was released, this is the one I found that day. And
Oh,
I turned
wow.
it sideways and the light just struck it. And I see the word Alcoholics Anonymous. And the word alcoholic to me was like holy water to a vampire. I hate the word so much. I literally was ugh.
Yeah.
I just I tried to put the book down and I was shaking so bad. I dropped it about 3 times, picked it up, put it back, dropped it, and I finally was like, and I just opened it and started reading. I opened it to the doctor's opinion and started reading. I was interested right away. It just got me. I can't explain it any other way. It just drew me in.
Mm.
It spoke to your condition.
It did. And by the second copy of Dr. Silkworth's letter, where he talks about the restless, irritable, discontent feeling, and then that immediate comfort and ease that comes from the first drink, like I don't have any hair, but it was like standing up. You know what I
I
mean?
hear
Like
you.
something spoke, those 3 words changed my life. I just devoured that book. So for those 7 days that I was in that quarantine cell, I could take 7 steps in one direction in a diagonal or 3 across the cell. That's how small the
Mm.
cell is. And I just remember for 7 days pacing in like an X shape, reading the big book, just devouring it.
Now, Jeffrey, you said earlier you had been called alcoholic by people who were not alcoholics. Something different happened here, though.
Well, the doctor's opinion, this is a non-alcoholic, but the way he talked about it, like he knew something that just amazing the way he put those 3 words together. The restless, irritable, discontent. I've heard other alcoholics talk about it, that those 3 words just strike a chord in us. But of course, Bill's story's right next. And I'm reading this story about this guy in the 30s and this and that. But even though our lives were so different, our stories were the same, and it had to do with how he felt and the weird stuff he did. And this guy was an alcoholic, and yeah, that was for me the first time. I mean, I had friends that may or may not be alcoholics, a lot of hard drinking buddies that I drank with, but nobody drank like I did, even in my circle, right? Even in my search for lower companions, I hung out with some pretty, intense people, and I would get always told to leave because I was behaving strangely and weird. And I'm talking rough and tough,
These are not things that normal people would laugh at, but as an alcoholic, yeah, we laugh
right?
at this now,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like I was a member of a drinking club that's whole purpose was to like be as wild and crazy as possible. And to this day, I'm the only member I know of who was kicked out of that club
Oh,
for
wow.
being too wild
Kicked
and
out of a
crazy.
drinking club.
Yeah. Yeah. So even though I hung out with what the world would think were a bunch of alcoholics, Bill's story was the first time I heard an alcoholic talking about being an alcoholic, and it sounded like me.
You had no problem with the language or anything. It was just speaking right to you.
Absolutely not. I fell in love with that book in a way that like was quite spiritual. Like I had like almost like a white light moment just reading the big book, right?
Mm.
It's hard to explain, but the language to me, I found it beautiful and I found it like I was connected to something greater than myself because it had this history. I have no issues with the language of the big book. I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. That's wonderful because it took me a while studying the book to grow to love it. And I respond to it now the way that you describe when you first read it.
Yeah.
Jeffrey, did you have any access to AA other than the Grapevine and the book Alcoholics Anonymous?
Yeah, once I was out of that holding cell, I was housed with 35 other inmates. When they walked me in there for the first time, all the other inmates are standing kind of in a column, like you're going to walk the gauntlet and everyone's going to size you up. Carrying this bag of stuff they give you that's going to be your life's possessions for however long you're in there. It's your new utensils, plastic cups and forks, and your new uniforms. And you're carrying it in this bag, and I'm carrying it. But I looked down to my right, immediately was a little white table with a piece of paper with 2 capital letter A's on it. It was a sign up sheet for an AA meeting. I dropped the bag they'd given me right there in front of these other guys. And it was like it's like somebody else was using my arm. I wrote my name on that piece of paper so fast. I think I made a statement to the other inmates they just kind of ignored me after, like, this guy's one of those guys. Like he wants to get clean and sober or
Jeffrey, you
whatever.
can't see this behind the lenses of my glasses because they're like reflecting like crazy, but you got me tearing up big time.
That's
It, it,
incredible.
it was unbelievable. I signed that sheet and I got escorted up. I had the Grapevine magazines that I took from that quarantine cell. I just grabbed the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions because it was there with the big book. So I was on this sign up sheet for an AA meeting, but it was, I think, like 2 weeks later that they called my name and was, Inmate Jeffrey, would you like to go to an AA meeting? And it was over the speakers. And I was like, you couldn't get me out of that cell fast enough, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to know what this thing was that I'd read about, I'd heard about a little bit out there in the world in popular culture, but really didn't know.
Describe your first AA meeting.
Yeah. By this time, two other inmates signed up. So they lead us into this little tiny room that's got just a white plastic table. There's big TV monitors up on the screen because they weren't allowed to host live meetings.
Okay.
And there's these laminated pieces of paper around the tables, which I found out were like the readings that they do, right? There's the preamble. And I didn't know what any of this stuff was.
Right.
I grabbed a coffee. I sat down in a chair. I sat down and right in front of the main big screen. The reading in front of me was chapter 3, more about alcoholism.
Mm-hmm.
So then these volunteers started popping up on the screen. I think there was 3, and my first AA meeting started. They introduced themselves. They acted like we've been going to AA meetings for years. Like, would you like to read more about alcoholism? And I
Jump
didn't
right
know what I
in.
was to do, but I did know. I think intuitively or seeing it in movies, I introduced myself for the first time as an alcoholic. I wasn't
Okay.
prompted to. I said my name and I said, I'm an alcoholic. And I read chapter 3. I wept while I read it. It wasn't how it works. It was more about alcoholism. I guess their group conscience, I've since met all these guys, is that they find that the relation newcomers can have to reading about all the things that we've tried to control and
Yeah.
enjoy our drinking can be quite profound. For me, it was amazing. I had read it before, but reading it aloud in front of these 2 other inmates that I didn't know and these guys from AA, I just wept. I couldn't get through it. It took me forever. I was crying like so deeply.
Was it the whole chapter or?
If it's the same portion that my home group reads, it ends with ad infinitum.
I believe it does. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, this is really strong. It opens with most of us have been unwilling to admit we were real alcoholics.
Yeah. There's a newcomer meeting that is local to my area, and they specifically read that because it's mostly newcomers that come to the meeting from treatment centers. And that meeting has a really great success rate of people sticking with the program. I love it. It's something about it. I saw myself there, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my first AA meeting.
Jeffrey, did you wind up establishing a relationship with those guys in your same housing unit?
I did. And we became friends. We kind of watched each other's backs. And there was times if any kind of violence or anything would break out, they would put you in lockdown. And a couple of the AA meetings were canceled due to other inmates fighting and stuff. But I asked the corrections officers to see if I could get copies of the laminates and bring them to my cell. And I ended up having impromptu meetings with these guys in front of my cell. To this day, I think I've ran the only inmate led meeting in that facility. And we used to call it the veranda because we were up on the 3rd floor in front of my cell. We'd have these plastic chairs and we'd just do a little impromptu meeting.
You're carrying the message at the very beginning.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Jeffrey, did you have a plan for when you were being released from jail?
Not really. My release date was so up in the air, right? Like I had a date that I knew my trial was supposed to begin. So I didn't know what was going to happen. There was a guy who said, if you knew your release date, I'd pick you up at the gate. Like they were willing, but I had no idea.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
What happened is I was transferred on the day my trial was supposed to begin. They cart you back to the city that you were originally arrested in and you're going to court. Turns out when I got to the courthouse, my lawyer met me there and he said that all of my charges were dropped. And I was released after 2 months of basically pretrial time.
Okay.
And I could tell you that a very feeble attempt at the amends process on my own paid off. And this program saved my life, but it just the willingness to live these principles that I barely knew anything about, I believe had a huge hand in a forgiveness part of, an amend, and everything was dropped. And I walked out a free man. But I was released into my mother's care because I had lost everything at this point. So, like any good gangster, we go to mom's, right? So,
did you have a sponsor when you were incarcerated? Because it sounds like you did a little bit of working the steps.
I had no sponsor. The book. They told me to get a home group, get a sponsor, go to meetings when I got out, but I didn't know what a sponsor was. But the big book does a really good job of walking you through.
Would you say you went through all the steps?
No, I didn't go through all of the steps. Like I had a very profound step 1, 2, and 3. I was in the isolation cell, and I remember right after you get through the ABCs, and then it's the very next line that you don't read at the meetings is being convinced. We were at step 3, and I was like, being convinced of what? And like everything I just read that I was convinced of, like on a level I didn't know was possible, I went, I'm at step 3.
Yeah.
But my step 2 moment was I came to believe that my higher power put that book in my hand. For sure, and wouldn't let me put it back on that shelf.
Yes, I was getting that too.
Yeah.
And I got on my knees and I just read the step 3 prayer in that isolation cell. And when I stood up, I was psychically changed. I had a complete psychic change. My whole outlook on life was different. I knew I was going to get out and I was going to join AA and I was going to do whatever they told me to do. But like when I literally stood up, I knew who I was, what I had to do. And I was like adrift in life. All that time of getting married and staying in a long marriage and having 3 kids and going to trade school and trying different business opportunities, but just like crashing and burning constantly because I couldn't stop drinking. What I did when I got to my mom's place, because like I need a meeting. So I just Googled it and I found an AA number for the area. And I called. A guy answered. He gave me the lowdown on the closest meetings and on all the schedules. And the guy who answered that 12-step call that day is a member of my home group. And we hang out all the time. I've since met every volunteer that was bringing the Zoom meetings inside. I've met them at live meetings around my area. We go to events together. We talk on the phone all the time. Absolutely amazing stuff.
Jeffrey, you make recovery attractive.
Yes. I mean, I just feel recovery coming off of you. It's just such a pleasure to meet.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
The Grapevine strives to be self-supporting.
Please subscribe to the magazine or app and visit the Grapevine online store.
The app is free in your phone's app store and has great content and features provided at no cost to you.
But if you subscribe, you get so much more. And you support all things Grapevine, including this podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Only $2.99 a month. I have some good news and some bad news. The good news is our fellowship has enough money to become fully self-supporting through our own contributions. The bad news is it's still out there in your pockets.
It's really not that funny.
Thanks for joining us. The AA Grapevine Half-Hour Variety Hour is posted every Monday and is produced by AA Grapevine, Inc. We don't speak for AA as a whole. We share the experience, strength, and hope of members to help others recover from alcoholism. All things Grapevine are available at aagrapevine.org, including our app and how to get in touch with us. Find us on Instagram and YouTube. If you want to know more about AA, visit AA.org or search online for Alcoholics Anonymous and your city.
Another God shot about how I thought the Grapevine magazine was a Reader's Digest. And so when I get out and I'm a year sober and I'm reading more about our history, and I find out that there was a huge connection between AA and Reader's Digest. They were supposed to print an advertisement for the new big book in the Reader's Digest, but that deal fell apart, and that's almost stopped the big book from getting out. There's a huge story in It Comes of Age about it anyway. That's amazing. Like there were so many of those little synchronicities that Carl Jung would talk about that happened in my story that just blow my mind. And there's another one in Pass It On, Bill's story. His father was like part of a quarry business and stuff, and they ended up having an office in Nelson, British Columbia, Canada. And Bill, when he was a kid, took a train from Vermont all the way to Nelson, BC, Canada, and spent time there. That's where I was born and raised.
You were connected to this left and right.